Live on Live.
Yulin Lee is an independent financial consultant from the US who is particularly interested in helping women and children become more financially literate and break the taboo, as she calls it, when it comes to talking about money. She helps clients get clarity on their short and long-term financial goals through educational workshops and one-on-one coaching. And she joins me now in the studio. Welcome, Yulin.
Well, thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, tell us what you mean when you say you want to break the taboo surrounding money.
Well, money is such emotionally charged subject. And it's interesting. It's the same way all over the world. And, it doesn't matter which culture you're coming from. It's always a very sensitive subject. And so when you look at from a financial planning, financial management, your overall financial wellness, you have to be able to talk about it to actually start improving and doing things with it. And so that's why, breaking this silence and breaking this taboo is so important, to my work of really getting people, particularly women, to just feel okay to be talking about it.
Why do women in particular find themselves perhaps at a disadvantage when it comes to financial issues and particularly finding autonomy?
Right. Again, I think a lot of it is cultural. But again, many different cultures have kind of the same background in that women historically have been taking this view of taking care of the family, and money associated with bringing the bacon home. Those are men's job, and I think historically women have been placed in a role of not being the one who's in charge of the money, and their main goal in life is taking care of family, bringing up the kids. And so that's why it's particularly challenging for women, because it's not something that they've been taught growing up, that this is something you need to take care of when you grow up. And it was a very telling moment when I talked to a gentleman about what I do. And he said, oh yeah, that's right. When I was growing up, I never was taught about money in the family. And when I graduated from college, I just knew I had to learn how to deal with it. And to me, that's such an eye-opening moment for me, because oftentimes that's not what I hear from women. Because growing up, they've been taught to find the right man, find your security through marry a good husband. And so the message have been different. And it's been, like that for centuries. And so I think we're on the cusp of changing that.
And you yourself were born in China.
Yes.
And then grew up, spent many years in the United States, which is where you're based most of the time now. Mm-hmm. How did your family background shape your learning about finances or talking about finances?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question, because, growing up in a Chinese family, but I find that my parents are actually very progressive, based on their context, the environment that they grew up in. So growing up, my mom actually always tell me, I remember high school and college, start dating. She had always said, make sure you don't just look for a man to marry for your security. And she said, when you're young, everyone is beautiful. But we all get old. And so then what do you do? What do you have to going for if that's all you based on yourself, your own value, your self-value is your youth, your beauty, or, whatever. And so she has always instilled in me this idea of I need to be independent on my own. And she said, you know what? When you're good, you will naturally find a nice man, a good man, because you have your own standards, right? Because you've already accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. And so I will say that I've been brought up in a probably not a very traditional Chinese background, in that I have always been encouraged to, do my own thing and be independent on my own. And so there I am, doing, working most of my life. And having my own career.
Yes, and before becoming independent, you worked a lot in real estate. You did business studies. You did a lot of different things.
I've done a variety of things. I went to school. I studied computer science. So I started out as an engineer. I worked in the Silicon Valley for 12 years in the high-tech industry, initially as a software engineer, and I moved over to marketing. But I myself has a real passion for investing in real estate. And so eventually I left high-tech and I went into real estate financing, investment, and eventually expanded into wealth management as well. And so that's kind of really how I marched down this path of now I'm a financial coach helping women. And it's, for me growing up, I've always had this encouragement from my parents to do well and, be independent. And I always assumed that's how everybody grew up. Right. And so it was really until I got into the workspace, working with clients and realizing, oh my God, there are so many women out there haven't heard this message. And it's actually the opposite. And so that even gave me more motivation for why I do what I do today.
So what's one of the first pieces of advice you would say to women, just sort of an initial starting point to kind of start thinking about taking control of the finance? What's one of the first things you address with them?
Awareness. I find that awareness is the key to everything you want to do, any kind of change. And so I meet women who are either aware that they need to make some change so they can have a different financial life going forward. And then there are people who may not be happy where they are, but then they haven't got to the awareness that they really need to work on themselves to start with. So really the first piece of advice is not the actual money piece itself.
Interesting.
But really looking at ourselves and understanding our own relationship to money. And the one thing I often hear from women I talk to are, oh my God, I need to work with you because I'm so bad at money. And that statement, when they say it, it may just be something that they just, casually say it. But I think it tells a lot about their psyches, of their own identity, of how they see themselves as it relates to money. Now, I have also talked to many men about what I do. I have never heard one man who has said that to me. And so, as you can tell, it's not, to me, it's not the capability of women handling money. It's really their own identity. Maybe it's a lack of confidence, and maybe it's just a lack of understanding that they need to be in charge. They need to be in the driver's seat of their finances. And so definitely awareness is the first step.
Yes.
And then after that, it's really understanding about the importance of building that self-confidence up.
Now, you're based, as I said, in the US, but you visit France on a regular basis, and you, in fact, lived in Paris for quite a few years, some years ago. What are some of the cultural differences you've observed between French women and the relationship with money and American women? Or I know you said earlier there were very little differences, that all around the world it's kind of a bit taboo, but there must be a few
of course.
things that you have
that's
observed.
Right. So I, in fact, actually started my financial coaching business in Paris here back in 2014 when I was still here. And at the time, the workshops that I did and the coaching that I do was really centered around the theme of investing. It's the education on how to invest your money. And it's also very interesting, something I learned when I went out and spoke with people. And I talked to one French lady, and she said, oh, it's very interesting because in France, we think about wealth preservation. We don't think so much about investing to grow. So that tells me a couple of things. One is that if you're born in a rich family, if you had the money, then you can work on the wealth preservation. But if you're born into an average family or a family with very little financial resources, there's nothing to preserve per se, right? And so really for those families, it's really about how to learn to invest, to go from nothing to maybe building more.
And that it's possible.
That's right.
It is possible.
That's right. So that concept, I find it's not as prevalent, and so most of my coaching work here and education is really centered around the concept of investing and what are the basics of investing. Moving back to the US, because of the social system, most people in America know that they have to take care of themselves for their retirement, right? So conceptually, people understand they need to learn to invest so they can take care of their future. So the issue in the U.S. is it has to do with debt, the consumer spending, the spending beyond the means. And with that issue, it's not just behavioral. A lot of behind that, there's a psychological factor of why people are doing that. And so I do deal with different issues in different, two different countries. But I think at the core is also helping women, again, building their confidence up around money. And the one thing I say today is that, if you think about it, if you take a step back, we've always been taking the role of taking care of family, raising kids. But raising kids are one of the hardest things in life, right? And so it's not a capability. We've got that nurturing nature in us. And so these days, I tell my clients, just imagine money is your child. How would you nurture your money? How would you nurture your child? So instead of just spending it here and there, or not spending it, just holding on on the surface, it looks like saving, but it could just be also another facet of fear. And that's not healthy either, right? So really think about if your wealth, if your money is your child, how would you nurture it?
Very interesting. Yeah. And speaking of children, just quickly as we wrap up, we'll give your website. It's Project M, right?
Right. It's Project M-mindmoney.com.
Okay, mindmoney.com. And that you're, after the summer period, you're going to be looking at creating a workshop, an online workshop, to help parents get started talking to their kids about financial literacy, right?
Right. So there's a couple programs I'm in, it's in the works. One is an online program that's specifically targeted at graduating high schoolers. Before them going into college, prepare them with some basic understanding of finances, budgeting, and if they live in America, they need to understand credit, how credit works. So those are very important subjects to prepare them for. And then the other program that I'm also designing is working with younger kids who are still, around 8th grade through 11th grade, or maybe even a little bit younger, teaching them these basics before they go off. But then what I also realized what's really important is that the family, the parents, at the end of the day, is who they learn from the most. And so if I can teach and work with the parents at the same time working with the kids, and then that way they can take what they learned and take it home and reinforce it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Yulin Lee, financial consultant, for being my guest on Paris Live today. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.